Millions of despairing men, women, and little children, victims of a system that makes men torture and imprison innocent people.
You cannot shake hands with a clenched fist.
Produced by a nuclear exchange would be carried by wind and water and soil and seed to the far corners of
the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
We're not saying that planet Earth is coming to an end. We're saying that planet Earth is about to be refurbished, spaded under, and have another chance to serve as a garden for another civilization.
Most of the people in here are just your reflections. They're your mistakes.
1776 will commence again if you try to take our firearms.
1 million of the planet's 8 million species are threatened.
You are what you repeatedly do. Therefore, excellence ought to be a habit, not an act.
Your lives and the credibility of the United Nations is at stake.
Epstein didn't kill himself.
The reason this is such an interesting time is not only because we're on the threshold of the end of this civilization.
They're trying to take you out with bullshit.
The experience of the past 2 years has proven beyond doubt that no nation can appease the Nazis.
To those who can hear me, I say, do not despair. The misery that is now upon us is but the passing of greed, the bitterness of men who fear the way of human progress. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people. And so long as men die, liberty will never perish.
In the language of the U.S. Department of Defense, these are unidentified aerial phenomena.
Roswell's a very interesting place with a lot of people that would like to know what's going on.
There is very compelling evidence that we may not be alone.
This is the Garden of Doom.
Welcome everybody into this week's episode of Garden of Doom, and our guest today is Shaman Brandon Safford, and I'm really pleased to have Shaman Safford with us for this episode. We're going to talk about his background, his journey, and a lot of the things involving First Nations. We've sort of danced around it a little bit. We've gotten some people to tell us stories and myths and legends that they've researched and reported on. But I don't know that we've ever gotten really close to the source and the authentic. Not to dismiss any of the prior guests, but today we're getting to the nub. So, Shaman Safford, thank you so much for joining us. And how are you today?
I'm doing great. How about yourself, Jeff?
I'm doing just fine. And I believe you're coming to us from the Dallas, Texas area?
Yeah, out in my meditation garden.
Excellent. All right. Well, tell us a little bit about your background and your studies and your journey and how you became a shaman.
Sure. Let's see. I started off from a very early age. I had a bit of an odd background religiously, as my parents went to a extremely fundamentalist church. My granddad was a Freemason. My grandmother was daughter of the Northern Star, and so naturally we eventually moved on to the DFW area and became Methodist.
Okay.
And
before we go further, I mean, first of all, for the audience out there, DFW is Dallas-Fort Worth. So for anyone who doesn't fly domestically in the United States, so you know what that means. Also, I don't know what daughter of the Northern Star is. So what's that mean?
Oh, sure. So long time ago, back in the 1800s, when genetics and eugenics and other things were kind of coming into their height of popularity, and some of their awful aspects as well. The Freemasons and one of there's a sister group to the Freemasons that the women follow, and they have different chapters, and one of the chapters is Daughters of the Northern Star. And I can't remember my grandfather's corresponding chapter off the the top of my head of the Freemasons, but basically they had something of a program where I don't know if breeding would be the right word, but they would try and mate off the two chapters to each other to continue a particular line or whatnot.
Okay.
And then on my other grandparents' side, I had my grandmother was Sac and Fox Indian, and so throughout my childhood we would go to powwow, and I would learn more and more about the ways of our tribe, the Sac and Fox Nation, which currently resides in Stroud, Oklahoma. At least the reservation does.
Is that part of a larger tribe? I forgive me if I'm using the wrong terms, but I understand like the Sioux were a gigantic nation, but made up of separate, distinct but related tribes. I'm not sure if this is a similar situation or if it's a sort of like your standalone.
Yeah, actually, so it's a great question, because even the Sac and Fox tribe has kind of a story similar to that. They started off in the Great Lakes area, one of the many nations within the Algonquin peoples, and so that was primarily the common tongue that our people would speak. And then the Sac and Fox they didn't actually call themselves the Sac and Fox. They were the Sauk, and they lived on the island with another tribe. And that island's people were the first ones that we know of that Lewis and Clark actually came into contact with. And so they referred to us as the Sac and Fox tribe when it was two separate tribes. Then later they got lumped into one, and when we were forced to migrate southward to the reservations, many generations later, we would go and we split into two separate people. So there's actually a separate Sac and Fox Nation up north, and then there's the one in Stroud as well. So.
Oh, okay. Very interesting. Okay. So where we left off, I think you said Methodist?
Yeah. And I had planned on being a minister. I was extremely active in the church. I've always been very religious. And then one day everything kind of changed for me, because there had been what's called a narthex that they had been planning to build at the church that we were going to. And they even had a little donation jar called Nickels for Narthex. And the entire time that I'd been going to this church, we've been saving up, and it was planned to be named after this lovely gentleman named Tom Vastine, who had gotten the church started back when it was just some folding chairs in the garage for people who wanted to do more studies, Bible studies and stuff. But they ended up naming the narthex after a lady who came in, and she was very rich. No one at the church knew her. She's kind of just one of those Easter Sunday people, and she donated the rest of the money. And I saw that the money they named the narthex after her, and basically I saw it was the money was more important to at least that church than the people who had invested their time in it. And as a teenager, that really broke my faith at the time, and I started questioning all sorts of things. Eventually, one of the ministers there, Bob Tice, introduced me to Gnosticism and something of a metaphor of the transference of souls using the water process of transpiration as an example. I don't know if you're familiar with it. I can go into it if you're not.
I'm not. I was gonna ask you. Yes.
Oh, okay. So the TLDR version is for those familiar with the cycle of transpiration. You have water in the ocean or lakes, and it eventually evaporates and rises up, condenses, forms clouds, which then turn to rain and fall back down to the land or the ocean itself. And rejoins the water cycle. So you have this kind eternal water cycle going. And water had always meant a great deal to me. I've always had very much a connection to it. And so the way he described Gnosticism was that we start off in the cloud, soul-wise, or the ocean. And, the ocean is one body of water, but it's also made up of drops that have now become indistinguishable from one another. But the ocean wants to experience the finite, and so it evaporates, and the water vapor rises up, and you have these individual gas molecules that, in and of themselves don't really do much until they condense enough to form a single droplet that then falls back down to Earth. And so the human body and soul life cycle and whatnot is that of a single drop of water falling from the sky back down towards the infinite. No matter what you do, it's eventually going to hit that, whether it falls on land and joins a stream and rolls back to the ocean or not. Eventually all paths lead back to the ocean, where we rejoin that massive body of souls that's now one, and then we cease to be as individuals. We're more one part of the greater whole again, which then will eventually decide that bits and components of us rise up as other gas molecules again, only to reform a droplet, fall back down as a different life or many different lives. Okay. And so that was really the first introduction I had into the idea of tying science and religion and spirituality and life into the natural cycles.
Yeah, well, that's interesting given everything. I'm dying to ask you about Freemasonry, but I'm not going to, because that's probably going to sidetrack us forever into, and that's probably a different topic for a different day. Okay, so let's skip all my side questions and we'll go straight to continuing where you left off. So this individual led you to introduce you to Gnosticism, and obviously that's not where it ended. That put you on a certain path.
Right. And eventually my studies led me to look at Wicca, which was a rather new thing being introduced during my teenage years. It's based upon a lot of the I guess you could even say indigenous lore and whatnot from Europe, and more naturalistic view of things. But eventually I found that too constraining in its I learned what I could from it effectively, and so expanded outwards and just started learning everything about every religion that I could, and all the old myths and legends that I could. Never lost my fascination with it. And my friends, because in Texas, your religion is second only to your favorite football team.
Yeah.
And so people would ask me, well, what religion are you? And at least the ones that I, could trust not to burn me at the stake for not being Christian. And so I'd tell them I'm kind of a salad bar shaman. I pick and choose from each of the various religions, and I kind of chose those based off of my beliefs rather than choosing my beliefs based upon my religion.
Right.
And the term just kind of stuck over the years, but then I stopped speaking about it largely because I ended up leaving that circle of friends in Austin, so most of the people who knew me just knew me as me rather than a shaman. Stayed more or less kept to myself, kept my views and spirituality and stuff private, except when going to visit my tribe, and even then, because Native Americans aren't immune to judgment and bias as well. And then eventually one day it just kind of felt like the world had changed enough to risk, coming forward as someone who'd been a shaman for over 30 years. And I was truly frightened at the time. I was afraid I would wake up. When I first posted it on, I think it was Twitter, I was worried that I would wake up the next morning with crosses burning in my yard and death threats and things like that. But actually, it turned out everyone was like, "Oh, okay, cool," and it was a great feeling. So I figured I'd just kind of continue going and helping and educating where I could, and things that I'd been learning for decades that I just kind of took for common knowledge. I realized a lot of people didn't necessarily know about. So every now and then I poke my head up and answer a question and offer a suggestion from there. And then I go back to just doing my own thing.
How would you define shamanism, and at what point did you realize that's what you were?
That was probably largely due to a wonderful book by his first name starts with a J. I think it's Jeremy or Jonathan. His last name is Narby, and it's called The Flight of the Feathered Serpent. So one of the, and this kind of ties into my own tribe as well, but a very recurring legend throughout many tribes is that of Quetzalcoatl, or something similar to him, which is a feathered serpent or rainbow serpent or cloud snake, basically a snake or a serpent that flies through the sky. And so that was the name of the book is Flight of the Feathered Serpent. And when I'd seen the title, I thought, wow, that really speaks to me at the time. And again, trying to find any sort of myths and legends and religious books outside of the Judeo-Christian, Muslim, actually even the Muslim and the Jewish areas were still at the time very under serviced in terms of available information. This was before World Wide Web and things.
Well, it's interesting that you should say that, because I recently was told, I'm not going to say learned because I'm not sure that it's accurate or not, but that the word seraph, like seraphim and seraphi, seraph means flying reptile, flying snake.
I did not know that, but it actually stands to reason. If you look at the depictions, if you have a snake outwards in front of you and its wings are out folded, then it would probably look very much like an angel.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So even in the Judeo-Christian and Islamic, because it's they're all, I'm told, people of the book, right? The books. It's there too, if that's correct. Now, I have not asked a lot of people whether that's correct or not, but the source that told me is pretty well known, and so I'm going to at least take it as it's reasonably likely.
Yeah, it checks with what I've learned and discovered over the years. You'd be hard pressed not to find an ancient culture that didn't have some sort of a flying entity that either brought blessings or banes to their tribes or their families or whatnot. Absolutely.
Yeah, so sorry, I didn't mean to interject, but I just thought that was an interesting little point that might have some impact.
It is, and it actually touches upon a subject that is real dear to me, which is the propagation of certain mythic archetypes across cultures that supposedly would never have contacted each other otherwise, and so that's kind of brought my own little ideas and theories as to how that might have happened. Everything from the psychological and personification aspects to a much greater trade network existing on Earth, outside of recorded history, which probably would account for so many oral histories. Anyway, the book itself talks about the shamanism of the ayahuasca people and some of the surrounding tribes around them, and the drink that they partake of, the ayahuasca, and they get guided through by a shaman, and it's a very powerful hallucinogenic drink. And so for those who are not normally able to see the spiritual realm, or their perceptions, are, what we think of as the regular human perception, it kind of opens each of those senses up more and more. And a very common sighting in there is glowing serpents of light. So not necessarily feathers per se, but feathers themselves are light. And it was something that was known among, Aztec, Toltec, Inca, and then I'm finding out later, as years go on, Navajo, Hopi, Ute, and then even later on than that, my own people. So like my family name from the tribe Manitoba, actually, depending on how you translate it, is either glowing serpent or winged serpent, winged snake, rainbow snake. So it just cemented it that much further that maybe the reason it called to me so much is either that there's something there, or at least that much of a familial connection to it. But yeah, and then the snake itself is kind of, you could almost think of it as a holographic zooming in of our own DNA. And among the shamans, our DNA isn't just code by which we are replicated, but rather something of an antenna that allows us to communicate with the world around us. And, a lot of that was just kind of dismissed as nonsense until the proof of biophotonic light started coming into play, which is to say, the human body and our DNA itself emits a very coherent light that if you were kind of to describe coherence versus brightness, imagine that you can see a candle or like a cigarette cherry or something like that from very far away, even though it's not particularly bright. It doesn't emit effulgence, but you can still see it clearly. That is coherence in a nutshell. And our DNA itself can both send and receive light along these paths. And so the idea of the ayahuasca is that you can increase your own photonic light and receive enough photonic light that you can communicate with the rest of the world around you that you wouldn't ordinarily be able to communicate with through, sound or touch and things like that, but instead basically radio transmission, because a lot of people don't realize radio waves are also light, so you could use it to communicate with animals and trees and the ground and the sky and so forth.
Right. So you can embed information into the light and it travels, the speed of light.
Yeah. And so the idea of shamanism is that we are all connected in this way at all times to all living things around us via these radio waves, and it doesn't, the ayahuasca, I've never taken ayahuasca myself, not opposed to it. It's just I've never had the occasion to travel that far south. But the ayahuasca isn't necessary for it. You can achieve the same thing with a deep enough level of meditation and connectedness and whatnot. So basically, I kind of took the messages from that book, and lacking ayahuasca, started pursuing other ways of getting my mind into a state where I could achieve that. And hence the next 30 years of learning.
Excellent. Okay, so this is the book was sort of not the start, but maybe where you can define the start, even though there were lots of things that led you up to that. And so where did the book take you to?
That's a great way to put it. Yeah, the book it may not have been the start. It was definitely a defining moment.
Right.
And so the book actually put me on the path of learning even more about my tribe and my peoples and stuff. And I got to learn the origin story of our tribe almost completely by accident. I was at a powwow one year, and I was very, very depressed because I'd seen, we are not a large tribe nor a wealthy tribe. There's probably less than 100 full-blooded Sac and Fox left. And so I was depressed enough that I left the powwow grounds, and one of my relatives was kind enough to open up the library for me to go in and start researching. And that was one where I found out about what our last name meant, but also I saw a symbol in one of the books there on a medicine bag that had been in the Bureau of Indian Affairs archives. And it was this cat with a very long tail that went all the way around it. And I had no idea what it was. It was just labeled the underwater panther. And that just really got my attention. Again, not really knowing why, but I had to know more about this cat, the underwater panther, and what happened. And so I spent the rest of the weekend trying to track down anyone I could find who remembered any of the old stories, which, you might not think is terribly difficult if you're at a res full of, other Indians. But the thing is, most of those stories got killed out of us. There was, the U.S. enacted its own version of genocide. I won't go too far into that, but suffice it to say, there was very much a time still in living memory of many of the tribe where your children were taken from you and put into Christian schools and made to learn the white man's ways. And if you didn't, you were killed. And sometimes you were killed even if you did. Wow. And you certainly didn't bring up any of the old ways. So really the only way anyone remembered it was by keeping their mouth shut and not, saying anything about it except behind closed doors. So, which, for anyone who's ever wondered, how come the knowledge isn't more readily available? And thank our parents and grandparents and their parents for setting up that situation. I don't really carry a grudge because I don't think anyone out there did these things nowadays. That's, anyway, point being, it was very hard to get information on the tribe, but finally they pointed out that one of my great aunts would remember the tale. And so she told me that long ago, back when the Sauk were still on our island, there was a massive flood. And the flood rose the waters so much that it trapped a panther inside its cave when the water levels rose up past the mouth of the cave. And an otter, seeing that this panther was starving to death, brought it fish each day to keep it alive until the waters finally receded enough to allow the panther to go out. And the panther, of course, didn't eat the otter. So the otter became sacred to us, and our people became known as the Underwater Panther tribe. And the Underwater Panthers eventually split into several different clans, but the ones who maintained the Underwater Panther connection was the Beaver clan, because there was an animal that basically reenacted the story of Underwater Panther each time by building basically an artificial cave and having the mouth of it enter up below the river and sharing its space with otters and whatnot. And the Beaver clan is the clan from which I am descended. I am the Manitoba line, and others are descended.
All right. Is that the origin story of the tribe that your grandmother taught you?
Yeah. That was the wild thing, is it had been forgotten for so long, and so I was so excited. I was telling other members of the tribe about it, and so they were able to do more looking into it as well. But basically, I had the the pleasure and honor of being able to unlock a piece of our tribe's past, and it was very precious to me. It still is.
That's a great story.
And it's and it's a beautiful icon as well.
Obviously, it wasn't lost on you, and it certainly wasn't lost on me that we have yet another sort of flood myth that sort of starts the whole thing.
Yeah, geomyths are fascinating now, and whereas they used to just kind of get dismissed as, religious backstory and hokum and kids' tales, now science is actually finding more and more and more factual validation of these things happening. And so geomyths, for those unfamiliar with the term, are when you have a story like a great flood or a great fire or some kind of a major ecological story that's happened and passed down, either usually through like an oral history or something. But like the Great Flood of Noah's Ark and stuff, that's a geomyth that occurs throughout Earth's histories, along with many others, like when glaciers would melt enough to suddenly pop like a champagne cork out of the mountains and release just an enormous amount of backflowing water between it. So there's various mountain and river and lake tribes that each have their own geomyths about when that happened as well. Heck, they just recently even had one in the paper about a connecting point, I believe, between, I think it was either Ireland and Britain, or Ireland and somewhere else. Might have been Scotland. The Isle was Jersey, I remember that. Mm-hmm. And the locals spoke of a time when you could just walk right across to the other landmass, and historians and geologists and stuff were like, no, that's ridiculous. There's a 15-kilometer or whatever stretch of land of ocean between them. There's not any land there. And come to find out that in point of fact there was. It's just been covered by the sea since then.
No, you're absolutely right, and it's not just there. It happened, it's happening all through the South Pacific. But of course, in modern times, the reason why everyone's going to know about it soon is because it's redefining the continental shelves and the and nation shelves so it's expanding territorial waters, basically, which changes navigation routes and resource harvesting rights and all the things that often causes wars and disputes over territory. So this while it's an amazing thing, and they're finding basically buried cities. Every city is Atlantis, of course, but they're finding architecture and archaeology, and marine archaeology is going to become a real thing, assuming we live. But that's how it's going to play out. So anybody listening to the show and thinks, big deal. Yeah, we know there was the Bering Land Bridge, and yes, we've heard about Pangaea and Lemuria, and it's mostly nonsense. Well, it's just remember this show when there's disputes between Cuba and the United States, or South American countries and Aruba or whatever. Well, Aruba's a little far. No, Aruba. Yeah, I was confusing Aruba with Bermuda. But, especially in where the Spratly Islands are and where China's ever expanding. So that's probably the most likely flashpoint. But you never know how the flashpoint's going to be. Anyway, that's more from Mike Hilliard on the Red Line to cover. But I just hope everyone puts like a little asterisk or pin in the back of their minds to remember this conversation and matter. If they think it doesn't matter, it may well affect their lives right now, even if they're not spiritual.
Oh, it very much does so, at least according to geomyths in the past. And, even so as an idea of what it, may or may not have done in the past, but also what it can do to a people. I was fortunate enough to come across a copy of the Book of the Hopi, and they have the accuracy of the Hopi's oral traditions and the astronomical records and everything else is just mind-blowing. And one of the things that's mentioned a few times are the different worlds that they had, and depending on whether or not we've been on other planets or not, you have the first world, which it could be that it was over as far, if you just took a strictly Earth-centric point of view on the myths. The first world, the Hopi people and others would have been probably over in Asia, more than likely, just reading the descriptions of the cultures and stuff at the time, probably having left the Tigris-Euphrates area and migrating eastward across until that world basically was deemed it was going to get destroyed with fire, if memory serves. And this kind of happens right around the time of other geomyths in that area, like in the Mahabharata, where the earth is largely scorched by fire in a massive war that would render cities and people into ash, and the land into poison that would kill anyone who tried to walk across it and make them sick and their hair fall out and stuff. So there's a lot of parallels to some sort of a nuclear war or something similar that just made the Asian continent largely inhospitable for at least some areas many thousands of years ago. So then Spider Woman, who is one of the helpers of the sun god, sealed up people into tubes with food that wouldn't run out, and basically sent them into the water to drift across the ocean. And then at some point when they emerged into the third world, that would have been the California area more than likely, and they traveled east until they hit the Rocky Mountains, and then traveled north and south along it, and a swastika pattern, not like the Nazi swastikas, but the plus with the bent L's shaped designs on it. And each of the clans within the Hopi, or the people who were the Hopi, who the Hopi would become, rather, were instructed by the guardian of that land that they had to migrate along these areas before they settled down. And when they so you can actually find records and evidence of the Hopi even as far south as like the Incas and into Mexico, and even bordering along with the Aztecs and Toltecs and whatnot. So and then as far north as Canada. So apparently they you can I guess where I was going with that is in a lot of people's histories, and I just touched on a couple of them there, you can tie these geomyths into common narratives of people kind of traveling across the globe into different areas as a result. As far as what's to come with floods and landmass and whatnot, my own personal theory is take your current estimates in the feet or tens of feet and multiply it by 10, and you're probably a lot more likely to see the equivalent level of ocean rise, because a lot of people and even a lot of scientists out there trying to analyze this don't realize the swimsuit effect, where, so you know how if you've ever worn a swimsuit and gotten into a pool and the suit itself bubbles up and stays on the surface, long after your body itself is sunk beneath it, because you have this air trapping layer beneath it. Well, the mantle is very much in the same way where it meets the ocean. You've got pockets of air and other gases that are keeping the land above it buoyant, or they're barely supported with columns of rock and dirt and stuff that would eventually get washed away if the barriers between them were gone. So, if you look at an area like coastal Texas, where most of our land is loam and bedrock is really far down, the sea levels and water tables and stuff can get hit with ocean waters washing those areas beneath the land away without us necessarily noticing, until a giant sinkhole opens, like what happened in the intersection in Guatemala and other places around the world. So as sea levels continue to rise in the feet or tens of feet, or however much people are expecting, you're going to have a lot of areas that just suddenly sink and fall down and get washed away, because the land underneath them has been washed away and can no longer support it. So the area of Texas, if you kind of want to imagine what that's going to look like, if you start heading up towards, westward towards the Grand Canyon, where you see the mesas, in West Texas and New Mexico and Arizona and Utah, poking up from the ground for hundreds of feet up with relatively flat ground beneath it. You can imagine that being Texas in the future, and then just raise the water level up to near the tops of those mesas, and that you're going to see stuff like that happen all around the world as time goes on, and the land drops away, and you end up with a lot of series of unconnected islands now around the place where mountains, mesas, or otherwise tall land in the hundreds of feet used to be.
Well, that is pretty scary stuff, but that fits in the Garden of Doom motif, I suppose. Well, not I suppose, absolutely. Yeah, it's like that building in Miami that fell. Nobody's really worried about the underlying cause. They're just worried that building, they didn't do the construction, and the homeowners didn't want to pay or the condo owners didn't want to pay the fee to get it done. But of course, it's the building that's not maintained properly. It's going to fall first. But it should be a warning to other buildings, and homeowners as well. Anyway, there's the folks out there who believe in climate change, and then there are folks out there who say it's not man-made, it's part of a natural cycle. And either way, what's the difference? I mean, either way, if you think it's coming, whether it's natural or not, I mean, shouldn't you do something to try to prevent the damage? If in fact you want, humans to survive it. If you're a true environmentalist, I mean, we'll sacrifice a bunch of things that are living now, but the earth will regenerate. So that's just, but that also is probably another show. So I want to go back to the Hopi for a moment, because my understanding is from, probably every source except, First Nation, Native American, is that the Hopi were referred to as the old ones, and that even in the Hopi legend that there was a precursor people called the Anasazi, I believe, that roughly translates to star people, or some people say ant people, or the word Anunnaki appears in one of the languages as ant people, which of course ties everything to, Sumeria, of course. But is there anything to that?
Oh, very much so. And each of those answers kind of has its own separate mythology behind it. If we kind of went with the main three that you mentioned, the ant people, for instance, if you were to take it, if you were to kind of take it to its scientific and literal origins, humans used to be much, much smaller, as well as our own precursor primates like lemurs and whatnot. And, one of the smallest lemurs that's still around, is smaller than the palm of your hand, and the largest ants are as large as the palm of your hand.
Yikes.
So in the precursor times before the Third World, the people that were seen as worthy of saving by the sun god were instructed via Spider Lady and the other guardian. I can't remember what the name was on that. I think it might have been Tokala. But anyway, they ordered people that were to be saved to go live among the ant people. And so they went into the hills with the ant people, and the ant people took care of the people, the humans or demi-humans or whatever they were, by sharing their food with them. But the precursors ate a lot more than the ants, and so the ants still following the creator's orders continued to get their food, and they grew smaller in size while the people grew larger in size until eventually they emerged from the hills when the air and the land was safe to go into again. So if you think of back to the nuclear war illusion, or whatever type of war would have caused something like that, you can almost think of it like a bomb shelter.
Sure.
And if you take the ant people literally, then it could just mean we were that much smaller at the time. Ants were that much larger at the time. Kind of making it feasible that people might learn how to domesticate ants the same way we do with bees and horses and cows and things like that. And using their own sugary foods that they make to keep us alive during that time, as well as their own underground farming and planting abilities as well.
You don't even have to domesticate them. You can just leverage it and just not bother them and just follow their burrowing and follow their tunnels and see what they're eating and eat what they eat. Just don't bother them and they won't bother you. And it doesn't need to be an intelligent domestication. Just be sort of be sort of parasitic almost, or leveraging is probably the word. I don't know. I'm just making this up as I go along.
Well, no, I mean, it stands to reason. I mean, I think soldier ants and, guardians of the nest and stuff might have otherwise attacked, but it wouldn't take a whole lot for someone to figure out to coat themselves with whatever secretions and chemicals and whatnot would be necessary to keep them from, being attacked by the ants, or even just accepted as, oh, yep, that's supposed to be there, and having them move on. So
keep a wide berth. Know what the borderline is.
Right.
Anyway,
so even from a scientific perspective, something like the ant people would be totally feasible and plausible without any suspension of disbelief, other than someone who might think that there was never anything precursor to humans, but science has already uncovered something like 30 different hominid species that coexisted with Homo sapiens. And so, I mean, you'd have to be pretty willfully blind to ignore the ideas of other humanoid people. And then you could take it even a step further from that and go with the assumption that the precursors weren't necessarily human at all, but rather some other intelligent species that looked upon primates kindly and cared for and watched over the primates until such time as they had brought about their own, as the precursors had brought about their own ends through war or strife or disease or whatnot. That then it was the primates' turn to take over. And then, as far as the the sky people goes, that actually kind of ties in with our with my tribe as well, as part of my family lineage was many generations ago. There was a marriage between the daughter of the sky people and the chief, one of the Manitoas, and her name was Shipea. And it's and again, it kind of gets into whose narrative you want to follow, because they were called, either the sky people or the cloud people is what they were commonly referred to. So if you went with strictly say a BIA or ethnographer's point of view, you could say, oh, well, that was probably a MacLeod family or something from Scotland. Scotland had quite a few different immigrants over into Sac and Fox lands that would, could make peace, and so it stands to reason that you might have had, some sort of a marriage between their family and ours to help cement that, because the cloud people were very pale and they had blue eyes, and so that's why anyone looking at my photos probably like, why is this white guy talking to us about Indian stuff? And I would say that's genetics. That's kind of the part of the agreement. And so they married it. The Manitoas remained chiefs for generations afterwards, inheriting the title until they eventually switched to democracy somewhere around 15 or 20 years ago.
Wow. So one version is it could be the MacLeods. The other is that literally from the sky of the stars, which of course is sort of like the Watchers, right. The Anunnaki, Zeus coming down and doing what he wants, kind of thing. Basically whatever region you're from, there's a similar legend of someone coming down and the intermarrying kind of thing, Gilgamesh, etc. So
I kind of take a halfway point in that myself, because again, I never really pretend to know the answers. I just collect more questions.
Sure.
So a very, very, like you said, a very common theme throughout many ancient cultures is a sky people or a cloud people or a star people of some sort that came through and would visit, say, every 20 years or so. And you see this everywhere from Hermes to the various devas in the Gitas to a ton of different other entities, basically, put it that way. And they almost always descend from the sky in some sort of craft. And, in case you haven't gathered by now, I'm also a huge fan of science, which I guess is one of the reasons shamanism appeals to me. My God is always there. I wake up in the morning and I look up and there's my God shining in the sky. I'm a Heliotheist. But what may be far more plausible than aliens coming to visit Earth is the idea that at least one, if not many civilizations throughout history figured out hot air balloon travel and would have traveled across lands and waters via hot air balloons to trade with people. And if you just kind of rode those currents, those air currents around the world, you could keep coming back to the same spots approximately every 20 years or so. So, you figure civilization that has managed to spend their whole life in a caravan of floating balloon ships could just as easily live off of a trade network where they stop in one port and they settle down, they do their trading, maybe get food or water or whatever it is they need to stock up on, trading gifts that they brought from other lands too far away for those people to get to, and then going back up and continuing on their journey. So I kind of think of it almost like a caravan of sky ships, I guess you could say, where people had figured out, hey, hot air rises. You can use bladders or cloths or whatnot to fill up with hot air and float somewhere else. And those things would long since be destroyed by now or mistaken for regular boats or other things, because the stuff that was used to trap the hot air would have long since biodegraded into nothingness or been destroyed or burned or repurposed into clothing or whatnot.
It's a great image. You could actually also see sails on the sides to help with directional navigation.
Definitely. And even rotors. I mean, people knew about rotors back then. One of the ways that ancient, I think it was Greeks, would move water was with something called an Archimedes screw, where you could basically turn a shaft that was shaped like a giant drill along a tube, and it would push water upwards by turning the shaft. So.
Yeah, there's that giant wheel I think at the bottom of it's either the Dead Sea or the Sea of Galilee. No one's exactly sure what that was for. I think they called it the Giant's Wheel, but that could fit into here somewhere. Anyway, let's go back to if there's any other origin stories or myths, legends, lore, doctrines. Use whatever words you like that you want to share with us.
Sure. Anything in particular? Or
I wish I knew what to ask. I don't. I mean, if I was to ask anything, it would probably be, I'd probably come up with something like, what's the deal with Coyote? Why is he in so many stories? But well, let's start with Coyote, because Coyote, I mean, and the few things it's sort of like almost like a trickster god, almost like sort of like the spider is in the Caribbean, and Loki is in the Norse. I mean, what's up with Coyote?
Or even Monkey King in the East.
Oh yeah, sure.
So I think Terry Pratchett, author of the Discworld series, I don't know if he invented the term or just popularized it, but he made one of my favorite terms, which is anthropomorphic personification. So if I say, the Grim Reaper or Death or something like that, one of the first images that calls to mind for most people is a guy in a black robe with a scythe ready to go, unless they come from a culture where they had a different anthropomorphic personification of an idea. So, depending on which, mindset you subscribe to, Coyote could either be the anthropomorphic personification of, trickery and playfulness, or, the honey badger just not giving an F. Coyote was, sometimes he would do good things, and sometimes he would do terrible things. Like there's a story where a wolf is trying to kill Coyote, and Coyote manages to trick the wolf into being away from its home for a long time. So Coyote then, in retaliation for Wolf trying to eat him, goes in and teases the wolf pup's kids, turns them against their father, and then after offering them milk, pees all over them. And then the mom chases him, gets stuck in a crevice and can't move, and Coyote took advantage of the situation to rape her. Basically, there's no nice way to put it. So, he can be as loathsome or funny or indifferent as they come. Loki is kind of a very good similar spirit to him. I guess the funny thing about most animal entities and deities and things is, unlike a lot of Western cultures, they weren't necessarily worshipped as gods. So there wasn't like, the god Coyote or the god Porcupine or, the goddess Steer Lady and stuff like that. You didn't really worship them, because in many ways these animal spirits were just as flawed and terrible as humanity can be, even though in other ways they can be just as generous and kind as well. So they were less of a being to be worshipped and more of a study in humanities, without necessarily having to pick out a specific person to target in there, because you got to figure, in a land with 500 or more nations prior to the destruction by plagues and whatnot, it might be very difficult to find a common language, much less a common name to ascribe this tale to. But the coyote, being ubiquitous across most of North America, was very easy to kind of point at, because it displayed a lot of the same behaviors of both sometimes trickery, sometimes kindness, most of the time just general mischief, and kind of serving as a good, I don't know, not necessarily a moral compass to point to, but a moral compass to use as a direction. Like, okay, so you're doing this thing as a joke, but is it doing it to harm someone, or to gain an advantage, or just to be funny? And it forces you to think about what you're doing and why.
Well, it could also be, from chaos or strife, you get stronger. The people say you need wars for the culture to adapt, for society to form new technologies. Sort of you have to burn a forest to regenerate the forest, kind of thing.
Yeah, and that is also sometimes very similar themes. So going into, I know a lot of people probably intended for this mainly to focus on North American tribes, but the one I've been educating myself most in recently is the ancient Indian people, like from India, and the Devas, because we in North America there weren't a whole lot of tribes with a written word to go with it, so there's not a lot of books to study. But the Vedas are very, very close to many of the oral traditions and teachings that I've found over the past. And so, taking an example from the Bhagavad Gita and Mahabharata, Arjuna, who is kind of the protagonist in the series, the human protagonist, one of the five Pandava sons, and he has chosen Krishna as his chariot driver when given the choice between either having Krishna's armies or having Krishna by his side, but Krishna not actually fighting. And so the Bhagavad Gita itself takes place after Arjuna sees all of his family and friends and teachers and people that he loves lined up on opposite sides of this battle line, this massive battle line that's supposed to take place, a world war. And he stops and he says, I can't do this. I can't go killing these people. And Krishna has to basically talk him into the battle. And you don't really find out until the end of Mahabharata why the battle had to take place in the first place, why Krishna was so eager to see this thing along. And the explanation that they're finally given is that over time, intelligent species become too wicked, too powerful, their weapons too strong, to the point where they could challenge the gods themselves and wipe out any trace of what is good in their creator's sight. And so they get put into a war against each other. Things are orchestrated so that they wipe each other out in the process. Also along with lots of good people and people who dedicated their lives to kindness. But then I guess the assumption in the story is those people are either collateral damage or acceptable losses, or just fated to do their part in wiping out evil.
Well, if you have to start over, you have to start over, right? I mean, the floods. I mean, the Tower of Babel is sort of like a version of that story, just localized. Armageddon comes from Harmageddo, the Mount Megiddo, or where there's supposed to be a similar type of, battle. So, yeah, this is as I think you said it earlier. It's pan-cultural. You used a different term, but transcontinental, whatever. That is very interesting. We did a show on the Vedic Indian culture. I forgot what I called it, but it was probably the Vedic. But anyway, if anyone wants to check it out, it'll be fairly obvious. And it wasn't. It was probably in the 90s for those episodes. But yeah, that's really interesting. I had a question for you. One, well, they're both probably fairly easy to answer, but is there any major differences between the origin stories or the lores or doctrines between the Native American cultures? They were sort of like the teepee or the wigwam, more nomadic, versus those that were, formed more permanent communities like the Pueblo and the I think the Navajo and the Hopi, sort of lived in cities, so to speak.
Yeah, there's so the way in which each people made their dwelling, as best I can tell, primarily that would be based around one of two things. It either had to be something that was fairly easy to make with materials that were in situ, or it had to be very difficult to make, requiring materials from a long journey. So the Navajo, for instance, they're, of course I can't, Hogans, I think, or Ogons, I think are the name of their houses. They require a particular type of wood, it needs to be from a fully grown tree, and they have to be laid out in just such a way. And obtaining this wood is very difficult because it's not like there's a whole lot of trees in the particular areas where you find these Ogons. So they would generally involve some sort of a pilgrimage or a trip or something along those lines to obtain the materials. Versus say like the Aztecs, who were very much around you could almost call them like an industrial society, where things were very much, a lot of people think of the Aztecs as like one people that had a massive empire of Aztecs going across the place, but really, arguably what their best ability was assimilation. Mm-hmm. For instance, the Toltecs had been around technologically and weapon-wise superior to what the Aztec had available, but the Aztecs had more number, and they decided to basically ally or marry with the Toltecs, and or however it's interpreted. I'm sure there's many interpretations and subtleties to them about what happened. And but eventually more of the Toltec beliefs were either outlawed or ignored or lessened in lieu of the Aztec beliefs and system of doing things. So they would assimilate the technology and the learning and the abilities. But in many, many ways, they were basically the Rome of South America.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually knew that, but I'm glad that you described it because, first of all, I knew it because I read a book by a guy named Gary Jennings called Aztec. So I'm relying on him. When I say I knew, it means I know what that author put in their book, which was a historical fiction book. So it's fiction. But I don't know that many of our audience would know that. But Aztec is, they didn't call themselves Aztecs. I think it was like the Mexica or something similar to that, which is where the word Mexico comes from. And they were originally the Aztecs, as I understand it. They were from further north and were, I think Aztec means dog people or something like that. And eventually they rose by, being nomadic and some combination of ruthless and cunning, much like the Mongols assimilated and the Romans and any other empire. Very few empires, just raise everything and say, it's our way or the highway. But the successful ones need to have assimilation. And then you have people sign on because it's like status. It was status to become a Roman citizen. That sort of thing. So the Navajo probably needed more. They were probably more guarded of their territory because they probably needed some exclusionary zone to keep those resources for themselves, and it probably had to expand periodically while there was regeneration, which maybe led to other conflicts. Because the Navajo, again, when I say I know, it's just what I've read or heard. So I've heard or believe I know that the Navajo were considered fairly ruthless in the Southwest.
Yeah, and I mean it's a good contrast that you bring up because with the Aztecs, for instance, it would probably be more accurate to say that it was more of a federation of tribes or an empire of different tribes that basically were like vassals of the Aztecs. So one of the reasons that you may have so many different words for what Aztec means will be a direct result of the people who had been brought into the Aztec nations and what their feelings about the Aztecs were as well. So, you might have some very complimentary terms, you might have some very derogatory terms, and you might have some that are just head scratchers. Mm. Whereas the Navajo and the Hopi and the Ute, a real common theme among them is that the creator would get basically tied in convenience and luxury and indolence with evil or leading to evil. And so they were prescribed to have to live in progressively harsher and more difficult lands, which kind of has its own little interesting parallel to the Garden of Eden. So, in the Hopi story, you've got, the first and second worlds were way too easy for humanity, and it was too easy for them to live. And so they were able to spend more and more time for leisure and abuse of their abilities and whatnot. And so that eventually led to the rising of enough evil that it required a reset. And then in the second world, same thing happened again. Even that was too easy, but apparently the third world was at least difficult enough, added in with those migration patterns that were required, that it kept people kind of hopefully focused on the mission at hand. But even that didn't always succeed. So you would have like the dreaded Bow clan in the Hopi legends that were one of the many clans of the Hopi. But as happens way too often with any nation, they ended up fighting each other over resources. I believe the biggest battle they had was over the Red City in the south. Although no one really knows where the Red City is, there's a few different ideas about where it could be.
Is it like your Atlantis?
Kind of, but on land. Basically, the Red City was a large, magnificent city that was on the southernmost, or at least along the south, in the migratory patterns that had been ordained or prescribed, and you weren't supposed to stay there. Each of the cities that were at those areas, you weren't supposed to stay at for very long. You were supposed to stay basically long enough to get some rest, get your feet on the ground, and then continue your migration until you get to your own city where you're supposed to be. And then at some point, there was some kind of a disagreement, and the Bow clan had, superior, technologically superior weapons, and have been waging enough war and committing enough atrocities in the eyes of the other Hopi clans that they were denied entrance into the Red City. And so the Bow clan said, okay, so we'll just fight you for it. So they decided to wage war against the Red City, and gradually the city fell to the Bow clan and the Kachinas, who that kind of merits its own conversation, because Kachinas is kind of a complex term depending on specifically what you're referring to. But these Kachinas were neither gods nor humans. They were, guardians and watchers and stuff, and so they stayed behind in the Red City and waited until the rest of the Hopi clans had evacuated from it, and then they destroyed the city, and basically left the message of, if you need us, you can call upon us and we'll help. And I guess kind of tying into that with Kachinas, you kind of had three different types of Kachinas. You had the, Kachinas with a capital K, and there were only a few of them, but those were, very much in their eyes, the people from the stars, the aliens, both metaphorically and literally. Still not necessarily gods, but seen as, very, very powerful compared to humans and whatnot.
Angels.
They basically kind of...
Archangels, that kind of thing.
Kind of, yeah. They did their thing, and then they left to go onward, never to return, which I guess kind of makes sense if you are thinking in terms of traveling from one star to another. It's going to be a long enough journey. You're probably not going to see anyone remaining alive if you ever come back, which probably won't, because by the time people think to come back, that generation's going to be long gone and dead. But apparently the Kachinas with a capital K left behind Kachinas with a lowercase k, who acted as kind of dormant guardian spirits. You could almost think of them as you could almost think of them as avatars or guardians or spirits that would show up when called to help out with things, but only if you knew the right words and movements. And those very much tie into the devas in Hindu mythology and Jainism and whatnot, with sutras, which are basically ways of praying or singing or posing oneself into various patterns that the body can do to get the devas to execute these commands. And the Kachinas were kind of the same way. But then you also have the Kachina clan, which was one of the leadership clans in the Hopi, and were very much regular, people like the other humans that were in there. But their primary mission was to kind of keep track with, what the expectations were of the powers that be.
So they were the people that were left in charge because they had the tie to the Kachinas with the lowercase k and the capital K, or at least they claim to have such.
Yeah, I kind of think of them as the tech support, really, kind of going with today's modern understanding of the way things go. If you pictured some sort of a neural net interface across Earth, and if you were a very, very technologically advanced species on Earth, and you knew you were going to leave for the stars one day, and that there weren't going to be any more people like yourself left on Earth, but you wanted to help the life that was going to be there in some way. So you make some sort of a drone or a robot system or a computer system or whatnot that can answer inquiries and codes and things to to help out, and it would answer if it recognized those things. And so if you're if you're a programmer and an engineer in a society like that, you're not going to design something made of metal and batteries, because that stuff's going to wear out way too quickly. You have to think in timelines in terms of, thousands or millions of years. So instead, you make these things out of biological elements that will continue to reproduce and spread and wait for the appropriate signals. And that way, when those signals are given, they can be responded to. And just like how you wouldn't design these responders out of metal and batteries and things, you wouldn't make the commands that you issue them require some sort of a operating system or code base like an iPhone or a computer, because by the time those things even become available again, they're going to be, they're going to have their own systems that they've developed. So instead, you go with the physiology of the things that you want to protect and figure out what those things are capable of doing. And so in the case of humans, you've got motions, body motions, and sounds that one can produce. So the ohm is a very prevalent meditative sound that one makes, and the sound itself actually carries across many, many cultures, not just Hindu cultures. But the important part of ohm isn't the O, it's the that kind of humming sound to it.
The medicine ball sound, the throat chanting sound. I always forget the instruments in Australia that sort of make a similar
didgeridoo.
I'll forget it again, but that's exactly right.
Yeah, the didgeridoo, a great example of the Aboriginal Australians. And so I kind of think of that as our organic dial tone to start initiate the conversation. For anyone old enough to remember when you actually had phones you could pick up off of a receiver and hold up to your ear instead of cell phones, the first sound you would always hear is the dial tone.
Yep.
And so I kind of think of it like that, and then whatever the body motion and sounds you make afterwards are kind of like dialing the phone number or issuing the computer command line or whatever it is that, however it does one to consider those things. And then, I guess you could almost think of Kachinas or guardian spirits or other spirits throughout many indigenous peoples' mythologies, the ones that they don't necessarily worship, but they transcend normal human abilities and they grant blessings or banes, depending on how they're used. You could almost think of them as like an organic computer system with drones capable of responding to what's needed. And it might not even be necessarily that simplified. It might have been something codified into every living creature's DNA that we just instinctually respond to in ways that, we don't even understand. And that kind of ties back into the whole shamanism idea and photonic light and the ability for, a human to be able to communicate with something like a tree or a bird or a deer or something like that, in that you find this universal organic language to speak to it with and make those requests.
You know what? I just realized that we never actually got to what I guess however simple it can be, what is the definition of a shaman or shamanism?
I would say, and I'm by no means, the definitive authority on this, but in my own opinion, shamanism is the one who continually learns about ways to connect themselves with the rest of the life and universe around them. So for instance, a good portion of my day, I have a segment in the morning and in the afternoon, and then at night when I get off work, and I go out to my meditation garden, and I observe very closely the world around me as I meditate. And maybe I am given an idea from the trees or from the plants or from an animal that happens to be nearby. Or maybe instead I notice something very different. Maybe one particular leaf looks very different from the way it did the day before. And I study that and try and find out what it means. It's a kind of a study of the interconnectedness of life, as well as the potential for life itself, and just learning how to communicate with it and to understand one's connection to it in one way or another, and ever expanding that outward. It's kind of an understanding that as humans, our perceptions are extremely limited. The range of what we can hear, touch, see, feel, taste is minuscule, doesn't even do the right justice to it. It's infinitesimal compared to the range available to be experienced. So, ordinarily a human might be able to expand that range with technology. We might use binoculars to see further away, a telescope to see even further away, or maybe we use, some sort of an audio, like a hearing aid, or whatever they call the distance hearing things, a shotgun mic or something, to pick up distances further away, or even a gas chromatograph to smell things at the atomic level that we wouldn't be able to do otherwise. And then, trying to understand those things technologically is a human way, trying to expand one's own latent self to be able to experience those things sans technology is probably where I would say the shamanism lies. I would definitely say not to confuse it with medicine men or wise women, or anything like that, where there's a sort of medicinal doctoring aspect to it. So that's probably one of my most frequent corrections that I have to make is, if I tell someone I'm a shaman, they're like, oh, like a medicine man. And I'm like, no, I'm
not a healer.
It's an entirely different thing. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, a shaman could be a medicine man if they were trained in that art, but it's two different disciplines, much like a lawyer could be a doctor also, something like that.
Or even trying to compare, say, a doctor versus a scientist.
Mm-hmm.
You could have scientists that are doctors and doctors that are scientists, but primarily they're studying two very different fields. A physicist, that was the word I was looking for. A physicist versus a doctor. So shamanism would probably be the physicist equivalent of what a medicine man would be to a doctor.
Right. So a community would need both, or would benefit from having both. All right. I hate to go from something so spiritual to probably things that are not unimportant, but a little bit more quickfire. By the way, we'll talk post show about hopefully an idea that you will agree to for the future. But if not, that's it is what it is. But what's the difference between a totem and a talisman?
So totems are usually denoted as a way to mark territory, or either physical territory like land, or spiritual territory like a religion, or even communication territory. So, for instance, if you had a totem pole, you may have very many different heads on it, each signifying a different thing. You might have one head on it that signifies, this is this particular tribe's lands. Another head that, says, these are our spiritual beliefs. And another head that says, this is the language that we speak. Or, any combination or lack or addition thereof. It's basically a message of some sort. That's probably the best way to put it. A totem is a message that you can leave out for some, whereas opposed to a talisman or an amulet, which those are typically used to either attract or repel something. So, you might have a talisman to bring luck, or you might have an amulet to ward off the evil eye, or something to that effect.
I understand. And what would you consider the dream catchers?
So I would say those actually probably classify as a fetish, and by fetish I don't necessarily mean I don't mean like wearing latex and
right, or you love
stuff
feet
like that.
It's not
Right. Yeah, it's more of a fetish is more of a construct that utilizes amulets and talismans and has some sort of a purpose or a significance behind it. So, for instance, if you designed a fetish like a dream catcher, where the idea is that the catgut or whatever sinew was used for the wedding inside of it is used to attract dreams, kind of the same way as a honeypot would. And then the little crystal that's usually sewn into the center of it acts as a fly trap, a way to trap the evil dreams in there until the rays of the sun can hit it in the morning and cleanse the crystal. Ideally, your dream catcher should be positioned in a place where the rays of the morning sun or whatever, after you're done sleeping, can go across it and cleanse out the crystal. And then the good dreams are filtered in a different way down through the tassels at the bottom that have either the leather straps and feathers and beads and whatnot, so that the good dreams get to filter down to the person. And I guess that kind of ties into the significance of the feather as well, because the feather has long been seen as, by many, many North and South American tribes, birds were typically messengers between people and heaven, or people and God. And the way that the feather basically would represent light, divine light of some sort. So you might find a whole lot of references to something that is feathered, but you might also find references to the same thing being effulgent or emitting light, or even rainbows, for that matter. Because if you think about the way that a feather looks, it even kind of operates and looks the same way light does from certain angles as it filters down through stuff, and becoming fractally smaller and smaller as it goes down, while still maintaining very much an aspect of the whole larger being. So I guess that was a bit of a long-winded answer, but so I would probably consider the dream catcher to be a fetish, rather than specifically an amulet or a talisman, something that used amulets and talismans.
Are there any other sort of common examples of fetish in this context to give folks a little bit more to try to understand that concept?
Oh yeah, I mean, probably the dream catcher is definitely one of the most iconic, but another one that is very commonly pervades are pipes. Many tribes used tobacco or other leaves during their ceremonies for any number of reasons. Oftentimes to please the spirits, going into back into the idea that there's only so much that humans necessarily are able to perceive of, or our bodies are a certain way and stuff. But if you wanted a fish to perceive something, you wouldn't try and communicate with it the same way a human would communicate with another human, you might pour some particular type of liquid into the water, or something down there, or maybe a sound, that the fish could perceive. And of course, I'm silently wincing as I say this, because apparently fish don't exist. If you've read Lulu Miller's book, but that's an entirely different story. So if you're trying to communicate with things that are lighter than air, or spirits that travel in the air in the clouds, or are even at ground level, but might as well be transparent gases compared to humans, then one of the ways you could communicate with them is through the smoke of aromatic plants. By burning a particular plant and having its smoke go out into the air, you're able to communicate your intentions with these other creatures that wouldn't necessarily be able to even see a human doing a sutra, or hear them singing or something like that. Or
but they would detect the gas and the aroma or the spirit of the gas, and that they understand, because they are also closer to gas or air or yeah. Okay, I get it. That's actually interesting. That I never knew any of that. I feel like we've gone a long time, and I have so many other questions, but I feel like I need to be fair of your time. So I have ideas for the future, and probably for things that are more trivial. But I think for now, I think having you talk to me for an hour and a half is more than enough for your Sunday afternoon. It's more than generous. So, is there any place where you have where people can follow you or support you, or is there, do you have anything to promote, or did I just find you as a subject matter expert and you're happy to talk about it? Because if there's anything to promote, this is a free promotion zone.
Cool. Yeah, I guess I'm remarkably self-promoting. I don't. At one point in time, I had started the Night Watch Institute in, I think, around 2017 or so, when the government finally started admitting that UFOs, UAP, and whatnot existed, and I wanted to study those because there was so much of a connection between the things I had experienced through my own life, and I wanted to learn more about it. And basically what I found after long enough trying to study it, that it was basically, trying to study it as a very small, unfunded organization was pretty much impossible. And it's only gotten more so with the advent of AI art and video and whatnot, as well as just the sheer fact that the technology that's available commercially is able to mimic UFO activity so well that there's nothing I felt that I could contribute to the study that other organizations would not already have at their disposal, except for my, shamanistic knowledge, which, don't really have people beating down the door for that. So I'm always willing to, hop on and offer my 2 cents where I can find it, or point out additional areas to research, or even find connections to. So, for instance, anyway, the short version is I don't really have anything to promote.
That's a fair answer.
I closed up the Night Watch Institute. Now I'm just Brandon, do my job each day. I do my shamanistic stuff outside of work, and I spend time with my family. So I appreciate the offer.
Sure.
To it,
that's all right.
People are more than welcome to reach out to me on Twitter. It's Shamanistic Science or just on Twitter. That's generally the only social media platform I have time to visit these days. I know there's a lot more people ask me to do Instagram and whatnot, but there's only so many hours outside the day I can devote to social media.
I'm with you. I actually deleted Instagram off my phone. I was just tired of notifications about things I don't care about. I feel you on that. Anyway, if you've got nothing to promote, that is fine. But I found him at Shaman Safford on Twitter, and I'm sure you can too. But like I said to the audience, I'm going to talk to him post show and see if maybe we can't come to some future arrangements. But again, an hour and a half is way enough on your Sunday afternoon. So I thank you so much, folks. Follow him if you like. And thank you very much for listening to the Garden of Doom this week. Remember to give a like, review, and a subscribe, and tell your friends, because this is a genre-defined show. So thank you very much, and you'll hear us next time in the Garden of Doom. Thank you once more, Shaman Brandon Safford.
The pleasure's all mine. Thank you for having me.
Excellent.